The House Committee on Natural Resources and Tourism will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Martin.
Here.
Representative St. Germain. Here. Vanderwall. Present. Outman. Here. Hoadley. Johnson. Preston. Here. Bonack. Fairbairn. Here. Wirtz. Here. McFall. Here. Scott. Weiss. Here. Arbit. Foreman. Here. Myers Phillips. Wooden. Here. Mr. Chair, you do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Representative St. Germain moves to approve the minutes of our June 4th meeting. The minutes are approved by unanimous consent. I'll now turn the gavel over to Chair Borton or Chair Regas. Okay.
The House Oversight Subcommittee on Weaponization of State Government will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Regas.
Here.
Representative Shriver. Present. Wolford. Present. Pohutsky. Here. Wagella. Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Representative Pohutsky moves to approve the minutes from the June 11th meeting without objection. So ordered.
The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, Rural Development, and Natural Resources will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Borton.
Here.
Representative Mueller.
Here.
Representative Green.
Present.
Representative Roth.
Here.
Representative DeSena. Representative O'Neill. Representative McKinney.
Here.
Mr. Chair, a quorum of the subcommittee is present.
Thank you very much. Representative Mueller moves to approve the minutes of our May 21st meeting without objection. So ordered.
I'd like to also recognize Representative Nyer, the chairman of Agriculture. He's in the audience today. Few brief opening comments by our chairs. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. The topic today is DNR accountability. The purpose, similar to some other recent committee hearings, ensuring the voice of the people is heard and that their concerns are addressed to the best of their ability by the elected representatives. We provide legislative oversight to the executive branch and the departments. I feel that the DNR probably has a public relations problem when residents are concerned with overreach by the DNR. Where they find accountability, they call it their elected officials, usually at town halls, emails, local coffee hours. My goal today is to shine a light on just a few of these issues, and for that to turn up help disperse some sound public policy to address their concerns. Due to the number of committee members, we'll be hearing from presenters on a number of topics. If the committee members have a personal experience or know some significant cases relating to the topic that isn't covered by our presenters, we'll do our best to accommodate, but we have a very limited time, and especially due to the number of committee members we have. Chair Regas. Yeah, you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in the Weaponization of State Government Committee, we have listened to several instances and cases of extreme overreach and downright abuse from the department and from the DNR. And these blatant abuses of power have real effects on Michigan citizens and have caused economic devastation in the case of the pig game ranchers, as well as personal devastation for the Detroit Animal Welfare Group when it came to defending their practices in court. I look forward to continuing to shine a light on these abuses and to finally stop the gross overreach from continuing. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, people from across this great state have reached out to my office with their personal experiences and concerns about DNR overreach and abuse. Back in district, I can't go to a restaurant, a gas station, or a grocery store without somebody coming up to me and talking about their issues that they've had with the DNR. I'd like to take just a minute and give you my personal experience with the DNR. After receiving a misdemeanor ticket for baiting because somebody reported seeing a deer at my bird feeder, I took the DNR to court. The judge threw out the case and in her judgment stated that the DNR was not allowed on my property anymore without my prior consent. I thought the issue was done at that point. But no, a few months later, a different conservation officer showed up at my home and said he was going to issue me a ticket for baiting. I told him it had already gone to court and he was not allowed on my property without my permission. When I showed him the judgment, he took a look at it and he stated, "No judge can tell me that I can't come on your property." At that point, I said, "That's between you and the court." I found out later that he actually attempted to get a warrant for my arrest, which was denied. We went to court on that second ticket, and not only did the judge rule in my favor, but ruled the law was unconstitutional. Again, I thought it was settled, but no. The DNR attempted to take me to circuit court at that point. Mike Cox, the Attorney General at the time, refused to charge me and asked the legislature to fix the law. My legal counsel told me the only way I could stop this endless appeals from the DNR was to go to Lansing, so here I am. Recently, someone said, "Ken, despite everything you've gone through with the DNR, it looks like it's turned out pretty positive for you. You became a state rep, you now chair the DNR's budget committee." I said, "You know, it hasn't been positive for me. I didn't want to come here. I don't want to be here, but I had to come here. I just wanted to be left alone to enjoy nature, the wildlife, and our beautiful natural resources in northern Michigan. But now that I'm here, I'll work every day to hold this department accountable, ensuring that our citizens are treated with courtesy and the respect they deserve, and fight to make sure nobody in this great state will ever have to experience what I went through." Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're pleased to welcome avid Michigan outdoorsman Ted Nugent to our hearing today. Mr. Nugent is an outspoken proponent of our First and Second Amendment rights, has organized thousands of pro-Second Amendment and pro-freedom events. He's dedicated to preserving our great outdoor Michigan heritage for future generations. And by the way, he does some music on the side.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and I just hope everybody listens to Ken Barton's words. Because if you're going to represent we the people, these atrocities and these abuses of powers are so widespread, and I'm more interested in this gathering, we the people, than this gathering. Because as a lifetime sportsman and conservation born in Detroit in 1948, we were the #1 conservation state in the nation. More family hours of recreation, more revenues generated, and more opportunities to optimize the wildlife biodiversity balance. Now, I want to set the table clear here today because there are some people in this room that are stupid enough to listen to the lying, anti-hunting media that have lied and falsely accused me of violations. I abide by the law. Before I go deer hunting, I buy a deer license. I examine where I can deer hunt with what weapon. My dad raised me in the discipline of conservation, marksmanship, safe gun handling, and the perfection of venison as the healthiest diet in the world. And now Michigan is now the laughing stock in the nation. As Representative Borton explained, I can cry tears of blood up here. There's no place I go where families don't come up to me with horror stories of being given a ticket because he has a salt block on his farm. And they'll do it under the lie of chronic wasting disease that has been proven scientifically. This is not a guitar player's hunch. The science is in. People can't get chronic wasting disease from a deer. Look it up. I looked it up. I studied with Dr. James Kroll and Dr. Christopher Seabury. People can't get chronic wasting disease. And you can't mitigate it because it's the same scientific encephalopathy as scabies in sheep. And once it's in the soil, it's there forever. I have a Ted Nugent Camp for Kids charity for 36 years. And in case anybody questions my integrity, mothers and fathers and grandparents bring their children to my camp every year to be given a positive influence, to be clean and sober like I've been for 77 years, which assists me in forming syllables before you today. Because I was disciplined to be an asset to God's miraculous renewable creation that is the job, the responsibility, the moral duty of the Natural Resource Commission that they have violated, and the Department of Natural Resources that they have violated, where wildlife must be managed based on carrying capacity of the habitat, optimizing that habitat, not just for game species, but for songbirds and endangered species. The hunters and fishermen and trappers of this great state and nation are responsible for the healthiest wildlife populations since the 1700s. I hope you're registering this information, because when I've testified before, I've testified the irrefutable truth, logic, and common sense that if I move apples closer to my terminally ill young boy, because when boys and girls are about to die, for years they've asked to go hunting with Ted Nugent before they die. Is there a more powerful connection than that? There isn't. And according to the DNR and the NRC, those billions of apples falling from the trees in Michigan are somehow going to cause a disease if I move them. That's insanity. And the people who enforce it and create these policies would qualify as insane. And they've ran people out of this state. An 18-year-old boy who got into bow hunting because of my TV show got a ticket because his bow case wasn't zipped up. There's a law in Michigan that wildlife policy has to be based on science. What's the science of a bow case? So I got rid of that law. When I started hunting, some man thought he had control whether I hunted out of a tree or not. Is that man in attendance here that has control over my tree climbing? No man has control over my tree climbing. There were 11 counties that it was forbidden to hunt on Sunday. Who is the man that can intervene between God's nature and my recreational, sporting, spirit connection to the good earth that can tell me that somehow mysteriously the hunting season ends when the sun goes down on Saturday? That's insane. So we got rid of that law. I beg you, on behalf of the people that come up to me every day, get rid of these insane violations of Prop G that says the game laws have to be based on science. And then the DNR sued me, and it said in the suit, this is funny. This is funny. They claim I had feral Russian boar. Well, for all of you who went to school in America, feral is an escaped domestic animal. My pigs were on the preserve. They hadn't escaped. So I'm being sued for something that doesn't exist. And Russian boar, there's no such species as a Russian boar. A Russian boar can only be a male pig that lives in Russia. It's not a species. I asked them, would you sue me for having pterodactyls? Because I have as many pterodactyls as I have feral Russian boar. And after tens of thousands of wasted hard-earned dollars, some judge finally went, yeah, I guess they're not feral and they're not Russian and some of them are females. I hope this pisses you off, because everybody that comes up to me is just livid. The DNR and the NRC have chased families out of the sport over absolutely insane anti-nature, anti-science regulations. The sandhill crane is a federal migratory game bird. It's known as a ribeye in the sky. But the NRC and DNR are so immoral that they say with a piece of paper you can shoot them. They're so overpopulated, instead of opening the season like they do on game animals, federal migratory game, they allow you to shoot them but forbid you to consume them. That's immoral. Every other state has laws against wanton waste. Thanks to the NRC and the DNR, we are by law mandated to waste ribeyes in the sky. Right now, the wolf is in the liability column because of the NRC and the DNR. The black bear is in the liability column, grossly underutilized. Sandhill cranes, liability column. Mourning doves, the #1 game bird in the world, people. And Michigan calls it a songbird. I ask you, do you have a shotgun shell box with a picture of a cardinal on it? You don't. But I have cases of shotgun shells that have pictures of doves on it. You can vote it to be a songbird. You can vote me to be a songbird, but I'll never be a songbird. You can't vote a game animal to be a songbird, but they did it. That's immoral. I beg of you, go back to sound science and put these magnificent creatures in the asset column, like moral, conscientious conservation people. The DNR and the NRC are the enemies of conservation in Michigan. I implore you, in the once great state of Michigan, the once #1 hunting state in the nation, let's return it to that responsible conservation, wise use ethic. Because right now, we are going down the toilet of abuse of power and violations of science. Thank you for hearing me today, but I'm trying to convey the passion and the anger that I am subjected to everywhere I go, because they know I've got a big mouth, which is what the founding fathers wanted all of us to do, by the way. Question authority, stand up for God, family, country, God's miraculous creation, and be stewardships of these precious resources. That's what I am. And the people against me are against those perfect conservation ethics. Thank you for hearing me today. I hope you respond. None of this was opinion. I have not expressed one opinion. I'd be glad to. Venison is delicious. No, that's not an opinion. This is science from a man who's lived 77 years with wildlife, and it's brought me quality of life and the discipline to avoid the insanity of the drugs and the alcohol and the tobacco nonsense of my so-called peer pressure. I don't have any peers, and the only person who can pressure me is Mrs. Nugent. Thank you for hearing me. I hope the truth, logic, and common sense of my testimony resonates and is responded to with a sense of decency for the very financial foundation of conservation and wildlife reverence in the great state of Michigan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. I didn't know if I was going to have to use the gavel or not. This gavel did come back from Safari. It's guaranteed to shoot
I can feel the spirit. Would anyone
charging rhino, and I'm not afraid to use it.
Anyone wish to ask me a question about anything I said? Because again, the science is irrefutable if you do your homework.
So we do have a few things we're going to cover. There's some private property and trespassing things we're going to get to, baiting, deer pelt reporting, chronic wasting disease, which you covered just a minute ago, and some hunting guidelines and so forth. So I'd like to get the UP contingent that's here also to come up to the table so they can answer some questions if you want to remain there. And if and
I'm more than happy.
Yeah, just and make sure it'd probably be best if you're sitting for the microphone to pick you up for recording.
Oh, I have a feeling they heard every word.
I know. That's why I didn't interrupt that. You're quite loud enough. So if the UP contingent, we have Mr. Joseph O'Leary, prosecuting attorney for Baraga County, Roger Turnan, farmer from Lance, Mr. Greg Johnson of Bear Mountain Lodge in Nogany. If they come up to the table. And I'm going to just, for purpose of introduction, I'm going to turn over to Chair Borton for a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Martin. We just want to recognize somebody in the audience. He happens to be standing up right now. We've got Oversight Committee Chair Jay DeBoyer. We'd like to thank you for everything you're doing here to hold our state government accountable. Thank you, Jay, for being here.
So we'll get into some of the issues that were brought up. Mr. O'Leary, I'd like to call on you first if you can give an overview of the issues you've dealt with regarding the DNR.
Is that working? Thank you for inviting me to speak to you. This is a very important issue. It's been overlooked far too long. My experience with wild pigs, and I'm talking truly wild pigs, occurred in 2002 in Baraga County. I had just recently been elected prosecutor, still kind of wet behind the ears. Suddenly, my phone starts ringing off the hook. There's these pigs. They're overrunning Point Abbey. They're running around in the woods. Those who are not familiar, Point Abbey is a beautiful little peninsula. It juts out into Lake Superior, a very unique ecosystem, and very near and dear to the hearts of those of us who live there. Well, a less than responsible gentleman had set up a hunting facility. He brought in elk, I think fallow deer, other exotic species, antelope. And then he got the great idea that he was going to introduce pigs to his facility. Well, he went down into the deep south. He brought back a truckload of truly wild pigs. These animals had been live trapped in Mississippi, Georgia, Florida. They had never seen a farm. They had never seen a fence. They had been raised in the woods, running around. He dropped them behind a woefully inadequate fence in Point Abbey. Well, they promptly escaped. They ran through that fence. They were running through all over Point Abbey. I'm getting a call, 4 or 5 calls a day. Hey, I got chased up the side of my barn by a pig. Hey, they're getting into my fields. They're tearing it up. These pigs were causing the types of damage that the DNR claims they've done this invasive species order to prevent. But these were actual wild animals. I went to the Michigan Department of Agriculture. At the time, they regulated these high-fence hunting facilities. I asked them for help. I mean, Baraga County was simply not equipped to handle 60-some pigs running around, wild pigs. They told me, no, those are outside the fence. That's the DNR's problem. So I contacted the DNR. I said, we got an issue here. We don't have the resources to manage it, but it's got to be dealt with. DNR told me, no, those pigs are escaped livestock. You go to the Department of Agriculture. Well, out of frustration, I contacted Governor Engler at the time. I wrote him a letter. I explained the situation. He got back to me. Talked to the Department of Agriculture. Nobody taking accountability, nobody trying to help us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I went to the Fourth Estate. I put out a press release. I talked to any newspaper, television, radio that would talk to me. I was on a talk show in Detroit. I was contacted by media in Grand Rapids. And my message was simple. If you are lawfully in the woods, you are lawfully in possession of a firearm, and you are confronted by one of these animals, shoot it. Defend yourself. You will not have a problem with the Baraga County prosecutor. This is 2002, remember. It worked. Literally, in a matter of days, the phone calls stopped. It's reported to me, I didn't participate, but I understand there were pig roasts all over Point Abbey. Well, I lived my life happily, pig-free, for the next about 10 years. Well, at that time, Roger Turnan, one of my constituents, a resident of Baraga County, a pig farmer, I believe the biggest pig farmer in the Upper Peninsula, he contacted me more than once, more than twice. Anybody who knows Roger knows he's very persistent. The DNR is trying to run me out of business. They're trying to destroy my farm. He begged me to come and take a look. What did I want to do with pigs? But I showed up. I got a tour of the farm. And another little fact to remember, this was around 2011, 12. At the time, Baraga County had the highest unemployment in the entire state of Michigan, one of the highest in the entire nation. I looked at this farm. It was excellent. It was secure, safe. I've seldom seen such a fine farming operation, and I thought, why does the DNR want to put this family out of their livelihood, add maybe 10, 11 more individuals to the unemployment line? Why? So I agreed that I would get involved, that I would represent Roger. I went to a meeting at the DNR's Ram Center in Grayling. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss this new declaratory ruling they had come up with. This ruling was issued to give guidance to the public on how you could tell a legal pig from an illegal pig. I won't go into too many details other than to say this declaratory ruling was absurd. If a pig had erect, folded, or floppy ears, illegal. If it had straight or curly tails, illegal. My personal favorite was the very last characteristic, and that was, this is as close to a quote as I can remember, characteristics not currently known to the DNR could make your pig illegal.
Mr. Lurie, that might be a good point for us to go to, Mr. Turnan, and he can explain the kind of definitions and what a farmer looks for, what they're actually raising, and defining the pigs.
Excuse me. We started raising hunting pigs, which we decided was a good way to make a living farming. It's tough to make a living farming in the UP. Basically, what you're looking for is, I better back up a little bit. The DNR claimed that we had illegal pigs, and they named wild boar, wild hog, you know, the old scenario, which could be any type of pig on the planet. A wild boar is basically, like Ted said, is similar to a Russian boar. It's a male pig intact running in the wild. Okay? So they made the invasive species order, said the Russian boar was illegal. We raised pigs by taking older breeds of pigs, breeding them for characteristics, been doing it for over 25 years. The DNR said what I'm doing is totally impossible, but the DNR doesn't know anything about anything. Now, how could, they've never had to prove what I'm basically breeding pigs backwards, okay? You guys, in the last 30 to 40 years, the pork producers have taken a pig that looks completely different. They've added ribs, less back fat, more muscle. If you take a bunch of pigs and you don't do anything to them, they will revert backwards. If you do not try to keep up certain characteristics or try to breed forward for some type of characteristics, they will revert back to their 10,000-year-old ancestry, because that's just basically what they do. If they live in the wild, pigs in generations, the ones that are faster, the ones that can take care of themselves, survive, the dumb ones die, and that's life. So the pigs keep reverting backwards. The DNR says Russian boar is illegal. They have never, ever defined what a Russian boar is. If somebody came to your place of business and told you what you're doing is illegal, wouldn't you make them define it? We have been in court. The DNR knows nothing about pigs, and they don't know anything about the law either. I can guarantee you that. But they know the court system with the power of the Attorney General's office. They can come with any kind of bullshit story there is. And they throw crap at the wall to see what sticks, and that's my story.
And we got a couple other things that are come up here relating to the pigs and hunting. But first I want to go to Mr. Johnson. You have the longest running legal suit with the DNR. Can you kind of give us a background on that?
Hello, my name's Greg Johnson. My friends call me the Moose Man, and I have Bear Mountain Lodge up in Marquette, Michigan. And 109th, there are 4 of these farms. This is not DNR. This is agriculture. And I graduated from Tech after I grew up in Battle Creek, and I did the international consulting as an engineer, doing natural resource protection, environmental protection, and I came back to the UP in 1990. In 2003, I built Bear Mountain Lodge, which is a 4,500 square foot lodge. So what we're seeing is me being here because DNR is out of their lane. They're doing agriculture, and they are not qualified by any means to be determining farm pigs. Rogers pigs are definitely not feral pigs. They're not wild pigs. They're livestock, domestic livestock. The courts have ruled it multiple times, and the court cases I've been on have been since 2012. It's 14 years, and yes, I did a lot of accolades as an engineer in my hunting businesses, but this is a pretty dubious award to have the longest running piece of litigation in the state of Michigan with the DNR. So they are not involved with agriculture unless they decide to come in. Joseph had made a great point. We had free-ranging pigs. I got involved with the feral swine work group. I got involved with writing the legislation. We were able to go through the legislature and write a law that mirrored what Joseph did. It's animals running at large. You can now shoot a pig that's running at large. No dogs, no horses, but if a pig is on your property or is on state property, you can shoot it. So boom, that whole technique that Joseph did up in Baraga County in 2000, 2001 is now part of our legislative program. That's you, the people, are the ones who put that through. The other thing Those guys who brought those pigs into Michigan were violating the law. Well, we put teeth into it. It's now a felony. If you were to bring a pig into Michigan and release it, you want to run your dog, you want to run a hunt, whatever, that's a felony violation. There's stiff fines for that. The people had spoken and put together a program to solve the concerns that the people were seeing in Michigan. The DNR, on the other hand, said, well, we do not want recreational shooting of pigs behind a fence. That's well documented, and that is a problem because that's, again, is not the DNR's program to set what businesses are available to be in Michigan. What you can do or cannot do in this state by law is the legislature. The people in Michigan decide whether we have liquor license or whether we have farms. It's not the DNR. So the overreaches came into that. So next thing you know, I'm in the lawsuit with the DNR. They come out to the farm. That's been going on since 14 years. I'm still in litigation. Other cases on the farms have been settled. I'm waiting at them, as we speak today, I'm waiting for a call, probably go over to Joseph or one of the other attorneys. Hey, the DNR wins. They ordered all your pigs to be killed. They demand that the courts order my pigs destroyed. The science is what we call up at Tech, junk science. They're using it more as a political tool to reach out and suppress anyone who wants to go hunting. And I don't care if you're hunting the natural resources. You heard today, excellent testimony. They don't want you hunting. They want you to line up and follow in them like a machine, one after another. They're doing the same thing with the farms. People have been harvesting. It's a select harvest. It's agritourism. They come from all over the country to experience Michigan's natural resources. We're located right up on the headwaters of Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. We're right on the edge of the wilderness, my farm. People stay with us and they take home good farm products. Everybody loves bacon, ham, baby back ribs, and sausage. And that's what we're seeing happening. They made up a series of rules, orders that become law. The courts don't respect the laws written by the people of Michigan. They're playing to what they call deference. They give DNR deference. The rules, I've been Marquette Circuit Court multiple times. In the last 2 years, I've been dragged into court 6 times. But before that, the judge ruled unconstitutional. It goes to the Court of Appeals. They say, well, we're going to give them deference. That means DNR has the ability to make up the laws, and that's not their job. The laws are the job, as you well know, the people's job, and that's done through us, through our legislatures. And that's what we're seeing why I'm in court. I'm a fighter. We're going to fight, and I wish you all to join us and help solve the problems with our government. And Uncle Ted brilliantly said they need to be put back in their place. Get out of the lane, get out of the way of conservation, get out of the way of the people of Michigan.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Chair Regas. She would like to bring somebody up for further testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we had testimony on, with you guys a couple weeks ago regarding the pig ranchers, the violations by the DNR. And one thing that struck me the deepest was the undercover hunt that the DNR had carried out. So Cody, would you please approach the table, and I would like you to explain to the committee what exactly happened at Superior Wildlife Adventures regarding this undercover hunt. And I do have a couple follow-up questions in case you miss a couple of the details that I really want you to hit on, okay?
Yeah,
Thank
so I'm
you.
Cody from Superior Wildlife Adventures. In September of 2021, we had DNR officers come out to our place and shoot pigs undercover. They reached out to us through Facebook wanting to book the hunts. They sent some messages about it, and we were talking back and forth, and they set up a date, but they came and they told us they didn't want any pictures taken. They didn't want us. We just had to gut the pig when they shot it, and that was it, because their wives were up in Marquette shopping. They didn't want their wives to see any pictures of it. They didn't want it on the credit card because they didn't want their wives to know. They ended up paying with a money order. to keep, so they said, so their wives didn't know and everything like that. They gave a whole story about how they talked to taxidermists, had everything ready for them to go out, and after they shot the pig, to take it down to the taxidermist, so that's why they wanted it whole, so their taxidermist could do it the way they wanted it to. And then they came out, shot the pig, took it home, said they had a great time and hoped they'd come back, and that was the last I heard of it until pretty much this winter. So over 3 years later, I finally heard that the DNR had been undercover at my place, and then we were being sued for it. So it'd been 3 years after they shot the pig that they finally heard about it.
What's interesting to me, and I know that Vice Chair Pohutsky also touched on this during that committee, was that the state of Michigan, we don't pay cash for things, right? And also what I found to be interesting as well is that to purchase a pig hunt, do you not have to sign some sort of liability form? Or there's paperwork involved, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes, when they come on the property, they have to sign a liability waiver.
And they used false names.
Yes, so when they approached through Facebook, his Facebook name was a false name as well. His first name was Steve, but his last name in Facebook was Smith, and then it was something else in real life. And when he signed the paper, I couldn't really read what his name was because it was just scribbled
Sure.
on there, so.
After our committee hearing on this topic, we have sent a list of document requests to the DNR. We have not received those documents yet, but part of our request include who authorized the DNR to go undercover on your property, who authorized these DNR officers to falsify documents and use false names to purchase this hunt, and where did the funds come from for this money order purchase to conduct this hunt. And then this is where the DNA testing came in, is that correct?
Yes, after they shot the pig, they had said they took DNA tests, and then they kept it in a fridge or freezer in Escanaba for a while, and then, like I said, it was 3 years later before we even knew they took the DNA test of anything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. That was not on our agenda, but I want to make sure that that story got out to the people in the audience, the people that are televising this committee, and my colleagues as well. So thank you, Cody, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very interesting and informative. I do have some private property and trespassing issues, open fields doctrine, things that we've been looking at. I'd like to get a little testimony from Representative Mueller, his experience on his farm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I mean, I've been in law enforcement for 19 years before I did this, so I am pro law enforcement. I'm also pro property rights, and, I'm anti-government overreach. In this case, we had just sold our house, and we went up to get lunch, and our neighbor, or the person that bought our house, called us and said, "Hey, the DNR is on your property." And I was like, "Well, what are they? Are they past the gate?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so we left our lunch. I drove down there, and sure enough, we have a gate because we have a wedding venue also out at our farm. And we had allowed some young men, because they're out hunting. They're in their mid-20s. I mean, they're out goose hunting on a weekend. So what would we rather have, our kids out goose hunting on a weekend, or doing shrooms and mushrooms, or smoking weed and doing dumb things that kids do these days? So I drove up there, and I talked to the DNR officer, and I said, "You're trespassing, you need to leave." And he was actually he was professional about it, but he was kind of surprised when I said that. And I said, "We have a little bit of a difference of opinion on the open fields doctrine." I said, "I understand that, you can come on here, but I don't see any exigent circumstance for you coming on to, mess with these young kids hunting." He said, "Well, I got a complaint that, they're hunting within 600 feet of a dwelling." And I said, "Well, you can stand on the road and clearly see they're not 600 feet from any dwelling." I said, "Any dwelling around here is on our property. And if you would have just came up and asked me about that, then you would have." He actually drove around my fence through a cornfield to go out there instead of just parking it and walk. If he would have just parked his vehicle and walked, I wouldn't really had a problem. I still don't think that the DNR can go on to your property. Exigent circumstances for hunting, come on, it's not like you're hiding a body out there, you're hunting, and I know that poaching and things is not legal, but, at the end of it, I just basically said, "Here's my card, or here's my number, call me if you have a problem and you want to come out on the property. I'll let you come out here. But the problem is just like when I was a police officer, there's certain calls I went on, like noise complaints and things like that, where I would drive by, roll my window down, and if I didn't think it was obnoxious, I wouldn't even make contact with the people. I'd just say it was unfounded and move on. And what I feel is they learn the letter of the law, but they don't, or the spirit of the law or letter of the law, but they don't use very much discretion. They're just told to do something, they do it, and then you need to have a little bit more discretion when it comes to their training on personal property rights, because they don't pay the taxes on that property, I do, and I allow the people that go out there to hunt. And like I said, I'd rather have these 20-year-old kids in the Fenton area out hunting than driving around doing teenager things and stupid things that they do. So that was my experience with it. And the other thing is, and I think Rep. Vanderwall might be able to testify to this when it comes to like baiting and things like that, and over on the west side of the state. And we've been hearing a little bit of rumors about this too, is we also own a cider mill, and they want to, our pulp, after we make the cider, they want to say that that's industrial waste. So what's the difference after you squeeze the apples and you get juice out of them versus the apples that fall off the tree on our 100 acres of land that rot because you don't pick all the apples, and then they want you to do one more step and have to throw it into a dumpster that you have to pay for, so then you have to raise the prices in a business that's only open 2.5 months out of the year on a piece of property that my grandfather bought in 1941 for $5,000. So that's what I'm saying when it comes to the government coming in. And another issue, this is just, when you talk about government overreach, we have the wedding venue on the property and an apple orchard. MDARD comes out, inspects the, the food, or where we make the donuts and stuff, and said, "Oh, where's your food license for your wedding venue?" And I'm like, that's 600 feet up there, and it doesn't have a kitchen. So now the government's making us get a food license for an establishment that doesn't even have a kitchen in it.
Thank you, Representative Miller. A little bit more on the property trespassing before I ask some more experience type things. I think it was Representative Preston probably has information from the UP. We've had testimony before, County Commissioner, things like that.
Yeah.
Make some overreach.
No, thank you, Chair. Recently, we had just introduced a bill regarding, the abuse of open fields doctrine, warrantless searches. And up in the Upper Peninsula, we have many, many people that are absolutely terrified of the DNR, terrified of testifying on this for fear of reprisal. I was able to convince a county commissioner and also an owner of one of the largest propane distributors in the UP to testify about the abuses that he's witnessed on his land regarding, the DNR conservation officers just coming onto his land, cutting his locks, and just, just the blatant abuse. And when I say that I had one gentleman, we actually had two, and there's probably at least 20 others that just simply refused to testify out of fear of reprisal. Well, sure enough, the man testified at the committee, and subsequently after that meeting, the conservation officers that were in attendance were overheard by a staffer disparaging him as they were walking down the sidewalk. And a day later, I came to find out that he had been served, that there was a warrant out for his arrest immediately after that committee hearing. So the weaponization that's occurring within the DNR is real. They have made a sustained attack on these game farms to put them out of business. They've tried to run Roger out of business, and enough is enough. This has to end. I wish I would have had my daughter buy a Hogan hog and show it at 4-H this year, just to prove to everybody that a Hogan hog is just another hog. These abuses have just gone on far too long, whether it's commercial fishing, you name it. If they don't like you, they will put you out of business, and that's the way it's been.
So, Mr. Nugent, I assume you're not fearful of retaliation from any government entity. People come and talk to you about hunting, and even through your own experiences. Do you have stories like that people come to you with?
Yes, I hear it every day. And again, I hope that people here representing the good citizens of Michigan are paying attention to these horror stories. I could keep you here for 100 days. If you watch the embarrassing TV show called Wardens, we're game wardens. I've been a sheriff deputy for 41 years. I've done raids with the U.S. Marshals. I got 14 felonies to my arrest, which is why my guitar playing is special. So I am a law and order guy. I know a quality of life comes from the heroes of law enforcement who secure our neighborhoods and our streets. But then there are jackbooted thugs, where they will literally, on opening day, that these old men, I'm an old man, I can't wait for November 15th. And if you see these programs where this old guy has been waiting all year, I get emotional. The November 15th moment in Michigan is a soul-cleansing, mystical, spiritual experience. And all you non-hunters, write that down. And this old guy's been waiting all year for November 15th, and as the sun comes up, here comes 3 game wardens that are violating their constitutional oath. And I know that oath. Those are sacred words. And they confront this old man and ask him, where's the salt block? What in God's name does a salt block have to do with anything? No one has ever shot a deer off a salt block because they don't go to salt blocks in the fall. Tell me the DNR knows this. Either they're dishonest or they have no moral compass. And then they find that this hunter is actually keeping and bearing arms, which is a God-given individual right that is guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, Second Amendment. They take his gun because he was keeping and bearing arms, charge him with a felony for having a pistol on him on opening day on his farm, write him a ticket, ruin his day, and then somehow common sense took place at the court and they threw out the felony it's a felony to keep and bear arms? They dropped the charge because it was so absurd, but they destroyed the man's gun. I dare anybody in attendance here to dare gather your thoughts and try to rationalize that indecency. Ladies and gentlemen, that kind of jackbooted thuggery is why we have half the deer hunters that we used to have. You know what that means? Half the revenues, half the family hours of recreation, and half the incentive to take part as a resource steward conservationist of God's miraculous creation. Do not underestimate those words. And I could tell you story after story. Remember, the game wardens that go to investigate a salt block, register this. They passed, 24 registered sex offenders, because that's what we do to sex offenders. We just register them. So they pass all those registered sex offenders to check out the salt block. What has happened to these people? That has no soul, that has no moral compass, that is intentional abuse of power. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I could keep you here for eternity with the people that stop me everywhere I go because they know I've always stood up for radical ideas like God, family, country, constitution, conservation, law and order. And so the media and now the government of Michigan has turned on the best families who want to be a benefit for wildlife balance, because everyone's air, soil, and water in this room can come from one source and one source only, wildlife habitat. So you need to thank hunters and fishermen and trappers that invest gazillions of dollars to make sure that we're growing balanced wildlife, not just the edible ones, but the ones that cleanse our soul. I'm just a guitar player, and I can name all 66 bird species on my property just by their flight. This is a big part of our life. This is not just recreation, though it does recreate our soul. It is sport because it's an incredible challenge, because God made these creatures to escape us. But ultimately, it's an escape from the modern outrage of the modern world to go back to our instinctual responsibilities to be a benefit to wildlife, which is why there's more deer, more turkey, more cougars, more bears, more geese, more turkeys than ever in recorded history. Thank a hunter for that, especially the great hunters of Michigan who are literally leaving the state and leaving the sport because of the Department of Natural Resources. Shame on them.
And shame on the Natural Resource Commission. I promise you, I've celebrated more November 15th than all of them combined. It's a sacred time in my life. Do not underestimate what it means to us, including those poor souls that are abused by the very agency whose salary we pay to enforce science-based regulations, not salt blocks on my farm. And again, no one's ever asked me a question about that because the people who make the regulations, they're ignorant. They don't even know. They don't know that a woodcock is a timber doodle. They don't know that we need fresh aspen growth. That's one thing the DNR is doing. I'll give a moment of salute to them with the grouse improvement habitat. But that's the only good one I can think of. So thank you for hearing us today. But your stories, they're isolated, but they are ubiquitous. I don't know a conservation family that doesn't have a horrible, heartbreaking encounter for no good, beneficial conservation or law enforcement purpose whatsoever. So again, thanks to those who testified. 'Cause we had undercover cops, undercover DNR come on. By the way, they're cowards. They could have called us. They're cowards. Those game wardens are cowards. They have no spine. They could have called us and said, let me check one of your pigs out. That's what I would have done. But no, they went in and lied and falsified information. We're going to catch these wild boar. One of them killed a sow. Does anybody in here not know the difference between a boar and a sow? Are you kidding me? This is funny. Except that people's lives are ruined. They're not boars. They're sows. Some of them are sows. It's a female pig. It's bizarro. So once again, thank you. I hope this resonates because it's so important. I love Michigan, and right now, the DNR and the NRC are the enemies of conservation.
We're going to switch gears a little bit. We talked a lot about the boars and so forth, so thanks for the UP delegates that came down. If you could take a seat so I can make room for Representative Beeson. I want him to kind of talk about the double dipping and costs and reporting of poaching. Mr. Nugent, if you want to stay up there, you may have another anecdotal thing you might want to share with us because your passion cannot be overemphasized here.
Thank you, Chair, for being here this committee. So if you guys aren't familiar, I'm Timmy Beeson, Bay County representative, also butcher. We've been in business. I've actually met Ted a long time ago at Haver Camps back in the day. And we've processed some of these hogs at the Renegade Ranch. Some of my friends from Bay County spent a lot of money. They bought a lot of steaks for me to go up there and have a great time and built a relationship with the owner up there. They went back there a few years. I processed them in the early 2000s. And man, it was very hard to process that red ham that came off that animal. It doesn't look like a pig that I processed. The sausage I make for you guys here, the other white meat, it looks nothing like it. It is nothing the same. But I'm here because back in that age, we continue to process deer, and we're out. A lot of the processors are out of business because of the regulation that the DNR required me to do. And back when chronic waste disease, before that, it was TB with my dad. We've been in the news since the early 90s. Every time there's a problem, it's the responsibility of the processor to be the law enforcement. I have to let you know when you bring a deer in, if you got it from the right area. I have to inform you that you got it from a TB area. I got to inform you as your processor and the taxidermist. I have to inform you all the rules that the DNR don't do. And the reason what they gave me was, it's too expensive to reprint the book, so we need you to handle it. Oh, wait a minute. I'm processing the deer, and at that time, I think we're at $85, and I have a crew of 13. We do a lot, and I'm like, it's not my responsibility as the deer processor to do all these things. Like, it's not. I mean, it'd be like telling a person that does makeup, oh, by the way, you need to know all the makeup that you're putting on your face and the stuff that you're removing and all the chemicals that you're in and out. Like, at what point in time, it's not the responsibility of the business. And they've actually made it harder and harder to the last 3 years where they did, ready for this, deer reporting. And I came to this job and I said, what are you doing? And they said, what do you mean? I said, we already give you all this information. You mandatory that we actually take all the information and send it to you, certified mail, every 15 days. Every processor has to give you these hide sheets. And they said, oh. But then they found blood on one of my old tickets, and Yusuf Rabi said, is that blood? And there's no evidence of that hearing in the DNR when I used to be in the DNR. So I said, it's crazy that we're making the processors give the data right here. It's the monthly hide sheet. My life hates it because my young boys, young guys that cut and young women that take in the sausage, and my sister was one of the best because she would sell a lot of sausage, would write this up, and it has the county. She has to put this on a sheet. We keep one sheet. We send one into the DNR. They already have the information that they're going to make a felony or civil infraction for the hunters to call in the information. I'm like, if you're going to do that, only make the hunters that don't take it to a processor. Have them people call in. We're double entering. But don't worry, folks. We just keep putting more money into the DNR. So, I mean, like, it's crazy. And now you're going to see, we even write when it stinks on there, right? Because the guys that cut it, I'm being honest because some deer do it. And that way when they say, man, my deer has an odor, I'm like, yeah, we wrote it. We called you to let you know that it's a little bit strong smelling. Yeah, I double gut shot it and I didn't find it for the next day. This happens. I know this. I process a lot of deer. I do a farm to table right in front of you. I process, make chili. Venison is amazing. The problem is we can't get people to do the job. And even for the hunger, for you folks that support the hunger, and I know that Ted, they gave us $90 this year to process a deer during deer season. The break-even point is $116 to break even, turn the coolers on for consumers' power, to run the units, to have all the license that you require. It's $115 to $119, depending on where the deer and how many times it's shot. Because a double shot means it's a little more work because you're spending more time on it. But this is the problem. Our state thinks it's extremely easy to have these licenses. And you guys can look, I have a license every year except for 2 years. I tried to shut down my facility and my friends came out of the woodwork and said, you're gonna do our deer. I'm like, no, I'm not. And they said, yes, you are. And you're gonna meet us where we're at. We wanna spend $100 and we'll package it ourselves. At what point in time is it the deer, is it the responsibility of the meat retail shop? Oh, and let me tell you what, the laws, if it's USDA, if it's non-USDA, if it's a pig that's actually grown, you can't put the meat together. They made it so that your processors are hoping, and I'm gonna tell you, every one of your deer processors are hoping that they either don't get caught or they just tell the DNR that they're not doing it that way. And you can have Dave Preston and some of these other people that process deer that come to our facilities. My Uncle Pat that said he's grandfathered in. My Uncle Pat is a Democrat. I'm a Republican. We work well together. And he just says he's grandfathered in. And he's like, let him take it, Beeson. Or let him take it to me. I don't care. And then somebody else, and he does 350 deer. I shut down my facility. I did 500 deer a year. I opened up back last year. I bought all the licenses. I'm totally licensed. The problem is when you make the law so hard on the businesses, everybody goes underground. So that's why the cost is so high. The workman's comp, the liability, the new insurance. You gotta pay these guys $20 an hour to stand on a walk-in cooler that's 36 degrees to 38 degrees for 12 hours of the day. I gotta tell you, I love the police department because they always come and actually, they're probably some of the smartest and best friends because when they get done working, they come and help me so that they can use the facility. And I appreciate them. And people that want a second job, I love the guys that come there because their sausage bill for their family could be up right at $400 to $500. And that's them doing the work themselves. They can actually shave it down. I teach people, I give them a break. I only charge them half of their deer processing if they just learn how to do it. Because we don't have enough people to do it. But now we have a surplus of deer. It's crazy that we don't have more hunters. And that's it. If you have any questions, I will be doing a deer in September, and all you guys can come have the chili. It's amazing. I break it all down. Sorry, sir.
No, that's fine. I knew I wound you up, Timmy, so we're good. Got a little bit of time for a couple questions. See what they are. Representative Weiss?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the passion of the testimony and concern around law and order. And you mentioned specifically going after sexual predators. And I gotta say, I feel really emotional and really upset because I'm a mother and I'm a teacher. And the fact that we're sitting here talking about salt licks and feral pigs when we are a month away from a deadline to get a budget passed, and we are not doing work to protect children from sexual predators.
You
can shut her off.
I think it's shameful.
We'll go to Representative Warts.
Well, then she doesn't need to serve on this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for being here. I come from rural Branch County, grew up in Hillsdale County, large population of agriculture, and actually on the front page of the Michigan Farm News this last week was an article about the overpopulation of deer in my community specifically. There's a farm in Hillsdale County that estimates that they have 200 deer in a 1.5 mile block on their property at any given time. It's decimating rural agriculture production. What would normally be 60 bushel an acre of soybeans, we're getting 24 bushels an acre because the deer are eating the plants right out of the ground, or they're eating the beans as they're being, they're harvesting them before we can harvest them, essentially. It costs on average $21 to $25 an acre to apply herbicide to try to prevent the deer from eating it. We've banned, as you said, we've banned baiting because of chronic wasting disease, but yet the deer are congregating in all of our fields and destroying another way of life. DNR even stated in this article that they estimate at one point there were 800,000 deer hunters in Michigan, and that there is half of that amount now here. And that to harvest and to maintain the deer population, that we would need to be harvesting 40% of the herd annually, which I think we all know is not happening because of the lack of deer farmers. And so my question for you is, Rep. Beeson and I have introduced some legislation that would legalize baiting, and also I have a bill that would allow for 2 free doe permits to start wrangling in. If you buy a base permit, that you kill does, get 2 does free, put that in your freezer, donate it, whatever. What do you see, I guess? Do you think those are good solutions? What do you think would be good solutions? And would you say it's also fair to say that DNR is not just taking away the hunter's ability to hunt, but the farmer's ability to farm? They've also started regulating and trying to control water usage. Prairie River is a river in my district that they have tried to reclassify to protect trout. There's now a 3-year case study that will be wrapped up this year. But DNR tried to sneak that in kind of under the radar, which would have taken away the farmer's ability to irrigate and grow, again, crops to provide and feed and sustain their livelihood. So how do we wrangle this back in?
Well, I love Hillsdale County. I've got a lot of hunting friends there that are more than willing, ready, and able to harvest extra deer, but don't give away 2 free doe tags. Give away free doe tags to anybody who wants them. We will never hurt the deer herd, because only really gung-ho, hardcore hunters will increase their harvest rate. We see that even with 2 buck limit in Michigan, a smaller percentage even harvest that second buck. Fred Bear, the great Fred Bear, introduced the concept of an early quiet archery season. And the DNR has just spit on the man's grave by having guns go off earlier and earlier every year. And I want to encourage young people to hunt, and certainly the debt that we owe the heroes of the military to have their own season. But listen to me when I tell you, I've talked to people, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County, where the deer population is absolutely out of control. There's a dead deer on the highway every 50 feet. Michigan should start the archery season September 1, like so many other states do, and go all the way through February. Once again, some guys will say it's too hot in September to hunt, then don't. But those of us that like to kill deer and know that we need to kill deer, we have a responsibility to kill deer. I had a DNR representative, I was going to call them official, but they were officially out of their mind. They came out and saw my corn and soybeans that were devastated. 80% of my corn and soybeans in our Concord farm were devastated. And this gal walked around, she looked at everything and goes, well, I see you'll need some extra doe permits, we'll give you 3. I go, who are you? I go, why were you hired to represent sportsmen and conservation? Who are you? Get off my property. I need 300 permits. And so I badgered them, because I do have a big mouth and I will expose their abuses in the public arena, and the public arena has responded. Open the archery season September 1 all the way to March 1, and let us shoot these surplus does. And they should make those doe tags free. And here's another incentive. You don't need to have a kid go out on an early season. A young person in Michigan should get a free deer license till they're 16. Now, there's an incentive, and I talked to these families. That would be the incentive. That's how you harvest more deer. And for those listening, do you know that our Hunters for the Hungry program and Sportsmen Against Hunger, we kill, process, and donate 250 million, 250 million natural, organic, nutritious meals of venison to soup kitchens and homeless shelters in America. And here in Michigan, we're one of the leading states where the good families of Michigan will kill those extra deer. We will process them, even though the stranglehold on the butchers is totally unnecessary and counterproductive. We butcher I'm a guitar player and a butcher. And we butcher our own deer, but we shoot so many that we actually process over a ton of venison for soup kitchens and homeless shelters in Michigan. We need to expand the opportunities and make it more financially friendly. And here's the point, Representative, and Representative Borton in the chair. I'd love to see the budget of the DNR and what they're spending my money on. I would love to see the waste. If ever there was a DOGE target, if ever there was a target to scrutinize the waste and fraud that the DNR is guilty of, I bet you we could cut it in half, have it much more efficient, and actually have law enforcement, game wardens actually do their job for conservation, not just abuse. So your points are well taken, but don't stop there. I recommended to the DNR, why don't you just open the season in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County? I grew up there, and there was no deer. We had to go north of Clare back in up till the 70s. There are so many deer. Just open the season in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County. No tags, no limit. Now, well, you wipe them out. I hope so, but we'll never wipe them out. But we will encourage people to participate and shoot extra deer, because a Buick doesn't discriminate between a doe and a buck. It's whatever runs in front of them they're going to hit. So that Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, dangerously overpopulated, just open the season, and then someone will say, what if they shoot a deer up north and claim it was Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County? So what? The ag department wants more deer killed. The DNR wants more deer killed. The soup kitchens want more deer killed. The insurance companies want more deer killed. The highway department wants more deer killed. Get the hell out of our way and let us do our job. So I take your points to heart, but I think we need to expand on that. It's not a slight overpopulation. It's a dangerous overpopulation. And you're right. It's devastating agriculture, slaughters on the highway. It breaks my heart. I actually stop and take the back straps off the deer on the highway. I'm a real conservationist. So we can mitigate this waste by increasing opportunities, and it will literally be responded to by the best hunters in the nation, Michigan hunters.
Well, and if I may add to confirm what you just said, so based on the 2023 report that was put out, Oakland County had 2,125 car deer accidents, but Kent County beat it with 2,171 car deer accidents. There were 58,806 vehicle car deer accidents in 2023, 19 fatalities, 11 of them were on motorcycles, and a couple of those happened in my district.
And those are low numbers because most of those deer get hit by cars and they die in the cattails in the grass. They don't see those deer. If they claim, I don't know what the number is they claim is killed statewide, but I would double that number based on the predators.
So you'd say it's more like 120,000 then?
Yeah, I'm at least. But yeah, Kent County, you're right. Jackson County, Hillsdale County, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County, Lenawee County, Washtenaw County. Increase the bag limit so that we can stop the slaughter, or at least reduce the slaughter on the highway. Those are wasted resources, and I'm against that. I studied this, I live this stuff. And again, they come up to me and they share these stories every day. I wish they would come to you and share their stories, but it would be overwhelming.
Yeah, not to be too flippant, but I think my fear is they open up in the suburban areas, then hostas would then become a baiting issue, and
Well, how about this? The Jackson County, Michigan has the most licensed deer hunters per capita than anywhere in America, bow hunters particularly, but they won't open the Ella Sharp Park. By the way, they claim that baiting accelerates the transfer of spit swapping, which is so ridiculous. That's all deer do before they're born and after they're dead. They swap spit. You know, if I throw a bucket of water in the lake, you think the fish are going to get wetter? They're not going to get wetter. They're as wet as they can be. If I spill some corn, they're not going to have more nose-to-nose contact. They had nose-to-nose contact on the way to the bait, and they have nose-to-nose contact as they leave the bait. That's all they do is have nose-to-nose contact. It's a lie. And so if we address these falsehoods and this dishonesty, we can put Michigan back on the map. Literally, Michigan deer hunters leave the state to go to Ohio and Illinois and Nebraska and Kansas and Texas, and we need to get back to science-based regulations to optimize that respect for that deer population. We could do that if we just implemented common sense, which is my goal here today.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. We've come up to a hard stop so we can finish the official business of the committee and so forth. They're really super information. The passion obviously is always shines. Appreciate your time and your dedication to this the sports that we have here. Thank you all very much for putting I'd like to ask Chair Borton if he could do a little wrap-up summary of some of the public relations issues we've been talking about with the DNR and some of the issues that we covered, and just wrap it up with a summary.
Yeah, just very quickly, I want to mention something that has bothered me, and I'm asking the DNR to make these changes. But on their website, the DNR claims that they are the largest landowner in the state of Michigan. The DNR doesn't own any land. They don't own the building they're in, as a matter of fact. All that is owned by you and I, the citizens of this state. But they continue to put that out there. They call their boat launches DNR boat launches. You know, they refer to DNR property all the time. It's not. And I want to see that culture change. I want them to call it what it really is, and it's public lands. It's owned by us. We've hired them to manage it properly, and we certainly, as the owners of that property, want to make sure we have input on how that's managed. That's all I've got, Mr. Chair.
And I thank you. That kind of summarizes what we've been doing today, and actually on several different committees that we've had this whole session. I had a few more questions that wanted to be asked. I'm hoping that maybe we can share them through an email or something. We're running up to a hard stop, so sorry we couldn't get to everybody. I knew it'd be with potentially 29 committee members. We couldn't get a question from everybody. But I think we have the pertinent stuff and the information is out there. Members of Natural Resource and Tourism Committee, we're going to continue our meeting and move to further business shortly. We'll come back to order at noon. The Natural Resource and Tourism Committee will go at ease. Folks, we saw.
Hold on a second.
We have three committees, so.
Representative Shriver moves to excuse absent members without objection, so ordered. There'll be no further business before the Oversight Subcommittee on Weaponization of State Government will stand adjourned.
Okay, all my committee members are here, so no reason to excuse absent members. There being no further business before this committee, the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, Rural Development, and Natural Resources stands adjourned.
Members of the Natural Resource and Tourism Committee will continue our meeting and move on to further business. Let's see. We'll come back to order. We're going to take up House Bill 4385, sponsored by Representative Andrews. We heard testimony on this bill back in June 4th. H2 substitute before you would require the property owners must notify their local units of government in the same way they are required to file a notice with the department when installing a soft erosion control structure is covered by the bill, and that the actions of these property owners need to be in compliance with local ordinances. It's a little convoluted. People have any questions on it? So right now, go ahead, Representative Arbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder about the date of January 1st, 2025. Why that date? Why are we legislating backwards?
It's based on the ordinances of if they're in place. So it's not that it goes back for that, it's what the date of the ordinances may apply.
Okay, thank you.
So if they've adopted the ordinance within that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to do substitute in a minute. We're going to adopt H2 first, and then we'll go into the amendment. Okay? So, Representative St. Germain makes a motion to adopt H2 sub. The clerk will take the roll.
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Martin?
Yes.
Representative St. Germain? Yes. Vanderwall? Yes. Outman? Yes. Hoadley? Yes. Johnson? Yes. Preston? Yes. Bonak? Yes. Fairbairn? Yes. Wertz? Yes. McFall? Yes. Scott? Weiss? Yes. Arbit? Yes. Foreman? Yes. Myers Phillips? Wooden? Yes. Mr. Chair, you have 15 yeas, 1 nay, and no pass. The motion does prevail.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We do have an amendment being offered. It'll be offered by Rep. Outman. He makes a motion to adopt the amendment. Would Rep. Outman like to speak to the amendment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You all have a copy of the amendment. This amendment to House Bill 4385 clarifies the conditions under which a local unit of government is considered to be in compliance with the bill. Specifically, the amendment adds the alternative condition that if a local unit of government is subject to a county zoning ordinance that is in effect as of January 1, 2025, and after January 1, 2025, the local unit of government adopts a local zoning ordinance that is consistent with this part. I move to adopt this amendment.
Question on the amendment from Representative Weiss?
I'm so sorry, just to clear, my question's on the sub, not the amendment, but if you want me to save it, I can. I just was curious if, my reading of it is that, I didn't understand if it was saying that local units of government, if they have ordinances in place already, if those ordinances could be more strict than the state law, or if they would have to be less strict than the state law. It didn't seem clear to me the way it was written, so I just wanted to ask that as a point of clarification.
So the ordinance would have to require a permit, and you can always go stricter than the state law, correct? Not always, but anyway, what we're trying to cover, especially with this amendment, it gets kind of convoluted, is whether or not you're using a county ordinance and then your local municipality creates one. It gives them the leeway to then adopt the local over what they've been using with the county.
Okay, I was just curious, like, it's just as an example, if a local government wanted to say, like, you can't have these out for as long as the state law permits, if they would be allowed to do that or not.
They would only be allowed to require a permit.
Sorry?
It is to file for a permit.
Right, a local ordinance could require a permit. They couldn't prohibit them.
Okay. All right, thank you.
The locals would basically document the permits when landowners get them.
So I get that they could require a permit. I guess the question, the point of the bill was to say that you can't have it out, or you, in these cases, that you could have them out for longer or potentially permanently, as long as they met the specifications. If a local unit of government did not want that to be the case, if they could have a local ordinance that said like, no, you can only have it out for the time frame in which there's like a high water mark.
I don't think that's the intent.
Right. They would already have to have the ordinance in place,
Okay,
and we're not aware of any of that.
Yeah, there's none that don't have, that say you can't have it or have removed it.
thank you.
That's one of the reasons we waited on this bill was to get feedback from a local, if there was, whether MML or MTA that had a local municipality that had an ordinance, and we did not find one. Okay. So, thank you, Rep. Altman, for your brief description. With the amendment being offered, do you make a motion to adopt the amendment? Yes, I make a motion. The clerk will take the roll.
On the motion to adopt the amendment, Chair Martin?
No.
Representative St. Germain?
No.
Vanderwall?
No.
Outman?
Yes.
Hoadley?
Yes.
Johnson? No. Preston?
No.
Bonack?
No.
Fairbairn?
No.
Wertz?
No.
McFall?
Pass.
Scott? Weiss?
Pass.
Arbit?
Pass.
Foreman?
Pass.
Myers Phillips? Wooden?
Pass.
Mr. Chair, you have 2 yeas, 9 nays, and 5 pass. With that, the motion does not prevail.
Thank you very much. So now Representative Hoadley make a motion to report House Bill 4385 with recommendation be referred to Committee on Rules as substitute H2. The clerk will take the roll.
On the motion to refer, Chair Martin?
Yes.
Representative St. Germain?
Yes.
Altman? Yes. Hoadley?
Yes.
Johnson? Preston?
Yes.
Bonack?
Yes.
Fairbairn?
Yes.
Wertz?
Yes.
McFall? Scott? Weiss? Arbit? Foreman?
No.
Myers Phillips?
No.
Wooden?
Pass.
Mr. Chair, you have 10 yeas, 2 nays, and 4 pass. With that, the motion does prevail.
House Bill 4385 is referred as substituted to the Committee on Rules. Okay, now we'll move on to testimony and a presentation from the Michigan Fish Producers Association. We have Mr. Scott Everett here, and he's the legislative consultant for the association. Give you 20 minutes there, Mr. Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the warm-up act this morning. The main event has arrived, commercial fishing. Thank you, members, for allowing us to testify today. My objective with this PowerPoint, I'm going to move as quickly as possible, is to give you a picture of commercial fishing historically and today, because it's critically important you understand what has happened in the past in order to make decisions for the future. This industry's got some major challenges that I'm going to attempt to outline for you today. In Michigan, there are 50 licenses, commercial fishing licenses owned by 13 businesses. And there are only 3 full-time state licensed commercial fishermen left in this state. There are about 10 part-time commercial fishermen, but there's only 3 full-time. And I'm going to go into some of the reasons why that is here in a minute. To give you some scale of what commercial fishing does, last year, about 1.5 million pounds of whitefish. That's the bread and butter of commercial fishermen. 3,000 pounds of perch, which I'm going to show you in a minute is hardly even worth fishing for. 73,000 pounds of catfish and 50,000 pounds of sheep's head. Not very valuable. Catfish and sheep's head, 25 cents a pound, 30 cents a pound. Not many people order a sheep's head dinner in a restaurant. It's mainly whitefish. Michigan tribes, going to explain to you some history of tribal fishing in Michigan. They catch another 1 million pounds of whitefish, 800,000 pounds of lake trout, and they're beginning, because under the new decree, it's allowed for them to catch walleye as well. So they're beginning to catch a few walleye. So Michigan totals, tribal and state license, 2.5 million pounds of whitefish, 800,000 pounds of lake trout, 300,000 pounds of perch. Now let's talk about some of our neighbors around the Great Lakes. Canada harvests 12 million pounds of walleye. That's down, I'm told, from about 15 million a couple years ago. Majority of that's coming out of Lake Erie, but there is a slug coming out of Lake Huron where our walleye out of Saginaw Bay swim across, get caught by the Canadians, and sold back to us. Perch, 4 million pounds. Whitefish, 1.5 million. Lake trout, 400,000. These numbers are incredibly hard to find. I may be off a little bit, but you get the general picture comparing it to the state, our state, that governs most of the Great Lakes waters. Ohio, another 740,000 pounds of perch. Now, what they've got going on in Lake Erie, walleye is a predator fish. They love to eat perch. And what Canada and Ohio are doing by harvesting walleye and perch is they're keeping Lake Erie in balance. And our commercial fishermen here in this state are very interested in doing that. Wisconsin, another 2.5 million pounds of whitefish and a few lake trout now coming out of Lake Superior. So that gives you kind of the scale of things, what our neighbors are doing. Our industry is, with 3 full-time commercial fishermen, is in trouble, and I'm going to try to explain to you why that is. This was the very first fish fry we had a few years ago. You can see Heritage Hall is under excavation. At this year's fish fry, it's changed a little bit. We've added, I'm not sure Harleys are a natural resource. I consider them a natural resource, but timber, commercial fishing, what a great afternoon. We served 4 kinds of fish at that fish fry. Whitefish, caught by some of these guys behind me, but we also served perch, walleye, and lake trout, which we had to get from somebody else. We had to get the perch either from Canada or Ohio. Same with the walleye. Lake trout may have been tribal caught in this state, but the point is that there was only one kind of fish that our commercial fishermen could bring to the fish fry, and we think that ought to change. Here are where the 3 full-time commercial fishermen are, one in Munising, Michigan, the Van Landshoots, the Rouleaus in Cedar River, Michigan. Skylar Rouleau is sitting behind me. He'll be up in a minute. And Dana Safarin, Oscoda, Saginaw Bay, and Harbor Beach. Those are the 3 full-time state-licensed commercial fishermen that are left. Here are the part-time. And again, for reasons I'm going to get into a minute, I think all of the part-time commercial fishermen would really like to be full-time, but it's going to take some help from all of you to make that happen. So let me go back in time a little bit. In the 1830s, commercial fishing, you can imagine, was huge in this state because it was a local protein source. 1865, right after the Civil War, were the first regulations on commercial fishing. Couldn't dump fish parts in the lakes, and the County Board of Commissioners were to make sure that didn't happen. Your predecessors passed the first law, if you will, through a resolution in this state in 1865 to prevent persons from that don't reside in this state from temporarily immigrating to this state to remove large quantities of fish without paying taxes. That was the first commercial fishing law. Board of Fish Commissioners established in 1873, and then in 1929, Act 84 of 1929 is the basis for the commercial fishing law today. From 1929 to 1950, 1,800 commercial fishermen on the Great Lakes fishing lake trout, whitefish, walleye, perch in Saginaw Bay. In 1943, commercial fishermen caught 6.8 million pounds of lake trout. Compare that to, those other numbers I showed you, but it didn't last very long because in 1933 is when an invasive species called the Atlantic sea lamprey was discovered in Lake Huron. And from 1933 to 1960, this snake or worm or whatever you want to call it, devastated most all the fish stocks in the Great Lakes. And by 1952, commercial fishermen caught 4,000 pounds of lake trout. That's how quickly this happened. So times were good for a while, but by 1952, it was a problem. In 1959, I read a book on this incredible thing, worldwide effort to figure out how to kill the sea lamprey to save the Great Lakes. And through the Conservation Department of Michigan and scientists from all over the world, in 1959, they discovered how to kill this larvae with a compound in their breeding grounds. And so they began to solve the problem in 1959. But there was a problem. There was nothing in the Great Lakes, okay? So the legislature, all of you, your predecessors, passed Act 154 of 1959. Now listen to this. This law said to the Conservation Commission, which is the NRC today, you can suspend a bridge, extend or modify the provisions of any statute or law concerning commercial fishing. So it doesn't matter what the law says, you can go ahead and change it. That's how bad things were in the Great Lakes, is they had to fix them, and the legislature gave the Conservation Commission the power to do it. So consequently, these are just of the 20, I call them emergency orders. They banned the fishing of lake trout in the mid-60s. No walleye in 1970, no perch in 1970 outside of Saginaw Bay. And in 1969, it used to be commercial fishermen could go wherever they wanted. It's now limited entry. You can only leave from a port and come back to one port. You can't go wherever you want. And in July 1971, those rules through the Administrative Procedures Act were converted, emergency orders were converted to rules. Now this is the main problem here. Those rules are governing commercial fishing today, those same rules. And that's one of the big challenges here. Meanwhile, and I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times in a row, meanwhile, Albert LeBlanc, Big Abe, this legend, was arrested while fishing on Lake Superior. The rumor is he was doing it on purpose. He meant to get arrested, and he was, who was a tribal fisherman. Long story short, 10 years later, a federal court decision called the Fox decision said that the DNR cannot apply Michigan law or those rules to tribal fishermen. That then resulted in that every 20 years a decree, an agreement between the federal government, the DNR, and the tribes, and they just finished one a few years ago, an agreement of what the regulations are going to be is agreed to by those parties. And in August of 2023, the new decree went into effect. Here are the tribal waters. This is where that decree governs commercial fishing, both tribal and state licensed. And the whole idea of this decree is to share the fish out of these waters. So it's not an exclusive waters for tribal fishermen to fish in. It's shared between the tribes and the state of Michigan. If you read the decree, that's mainly what's in this thing, is how they divide up the fish. And those are the tribal waters in blue that they apply to. Meanwhile, rehabilitation had to happen. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service raises and plants lake trout. Since 1981, 140, that's as far back as I could find, 140 million lake trout, and they continue today. 4 million a year are planted in Lake Michigan's and Huron. And commercial fishermen believe that lake trout numbers are increasing and adversely affecting whitefish. They compete for food and habitat. Lake trout prey on whitefish. Some areas you can only catch lake trout. There are no whitefish. And, you know, commercial fishermen are very angry about this, that, you know, it borders on mismanagement is what they believe. So since the time of the sea lamprey, there has been a very aggressive program in the Great Lakes of planting lake trout, and commercial fishermen believe, because they can't take lake trout, that this is affecting the mainstay, which is whitefish. Meanwhile, in 1966, the first salmon were planted in the Great Lakes by the DNR. They began with 15 million coho and 6 million Chinook or Chinooks, however you want to say it. This was not rehabilitation. These are non-native fish to the state of Michigan, a non-native organism, which is the definition of an invasive species, but be that as it may. Specific purpose was to create a sport fishery for an economy, and I think it does that. Significant Michigan DNR efforts raising and planting salmon go on each year. Commercial fishing has zero interest in salmon, zero. Meanwhile, Saginaw Bay. Saginaw Bay used to be the greatest perch fishery on the planet, but it's not anymore. From 1979 to 2014, the Michigan DNR planted 26 million and change of walleye, and they really took off. And to show you what happened here, in 1995, 121,000 pounds of perch were harvested by commercial fishermen. 430,000 pounds were harvested by sport fishermen, okay, in 1995. Last year, 3,000 pounds of perch were caught by commercial fishers in Saginaw Bay. There's no quota on perch, correct? There was no quota on perch. Commercial fishermen could catch as many as they wanted. And down at the bottom here, from 1986 to 2017, sport fishermen caught 80% of the perch, and commercial fishermen caught 19%. And I thought that was very significant that both can happen in the same area and happen and harvest the way it probably should. The result of this, the Saginaw Bay perch fishery has been nearly destroyed by the walleye. Walleye feast on perch, they love them. Apparently, there was no desire by the DNR to use commercial fishing to help balance walleye and perch like is being done in Lake Erie. Commercial fishermen continue to be prevented from taking walleye due to those 1960 sea lamprey rules. At least 15 years ago, probably 20 years ago, commercial fishermen should have backed off of the perch and converted to some walleye. But instead, nothing changed. So here, right here, you can tell by the net, I can anyway, that small mesh net, this commercial fisherman is fishing for perch. This is a load full of walleye. This does not happen all the time, but if you're commercial fishing during weather like we have today, this is the result of it. Commercial fishermen would go to jail if he brought these walleye in. So what a wasted resource, and it needs to change. Commercial fishermen believe their job is to catch fish for people who either don't want or cannot catch it themselves on the Great Lakes. 90% of Michigan citizens are potential customers. This is what they believe. I think they're right about this. There's about 1 million sport fishing licenses sold in Michigan, 1.3 I believe it is, which means about 10% of Michigan's population actually fish. 90% don't. And overwhelming, the 10% that buy fishing license are fishing on inland lakes and streams. That's what that looks like. There is zero commercial fishing that happens on any inland lake and stream in the state of Michigan. It's open water on the Great Lakes. And I would argue that the fishing licenses, I don't know this number, but well exceed 95% fish inland lakes and streams. In the 1960s, commercial fishermen believe that these 1960 rules need to go and they need to go soon. Back then it was legitimate, but it's been 60 years. And the grave concern here is that we're well on our way of doing the exact same thing to whitefish with lake trout that the walleye did to the perch in Saginaw Bay. Back in the day, commercial fishermen were told lake trout and walleye would be commercially fished again once we can rehabilitate the Great Lakes, and we need your help to do that. It's 60 years later. And the tribal decree agreement in state law, they believe should be very similar. So the agreement that was made between the DNR, the feds, and the tribes, state law and the way state licensed commercial fishermen are governed should be pretty close. And it's not even close right now. So today, behind me, I'm just going to get right into the introductions. This is a list of where all the full-time and part-time commercial fishermen are. Here today, they're from all over the state. The Rouleau brothers established a fishing operation, it says on this slide, in 1850. I found out last night that's not true. They established their operation in 1830, which has got to make them one of the oldest continuous businesses in the state of Michigan. It predates statehood for Michigan. Schuyler Rouleau is here today. Schuyler Rouleau is here today. That's his dad on that slide, Bob Rouleau. We lost Bob to cancer a couple years ago. I sure wish he was around because he was one of the coolest guys on the planet, and his son is here today who inherited some of his dad's coolness, but not all. They run a trawl, so there are no nets out where they fish. I have not seen this actually operate. I'd like to someday. They go out and they run their fish finders, and they drive around out there and load whitefish onto their boat. In Cedar River, Michigan, it's the Michigan waters of Green Bay, and if you're like me, you've got to look at a state map to see that we do own waters of Green Bay, which makes, I'm sure, the Green Bay Packers happy. Safarin Fishery, they fish in Oscoda, Saginaw Bay, and Harbor Beach. Dana is here today. His son is back home working. They fish with a trap net. And a trap net is the most common way to commercial fish today. It's pretty slick how this works. If you look toward the front, that square called the pot, and then you have these leads that go out. This entire apparatus is underwater, and I do not believe the boat motor prop can hit a trap net. It's all underwater. But the fish swim up these leads, and they swim into the pot, and they're not smart enough to swim out again. They could if they wanted to. And they wait there for somebody to come pick them up. And so the best fish, best product is a live fish when you harvest it, and that's what a trap net is designed to do. And so here's the Safarin boat. The fish are put on the sorting table. The captain standing in the background, he doesn't work at the table. He holds the rope, apparently. He's here today. I've taken enough shots at him, and he'll be up here in a second. Big Stone Bay Fishery in Mackinac City, Michigan, the McMurrays, they do three things. They process, they have a retail outlet right there in Mackinac City, and they also wholesale a whole bunch of Great Lakes fish. Cam and Bonnie are the mom and dad, but the three kids are taking over doing it better. You're welcome, Cam. Dustin, Sam, and Audrey, and Dustin is here today. John Cross, Charlevoix, Michigan. The second bigger processor of Great Lakes fish in Michigan. And finally, the famous fish town in Leland, Michigan. The Carlson's Fish Market is the heart of Fishtown, and the two people that run that is Mike and Cassie Berta of Carlson's Fish Market, and Mike is here today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if I could just take a back seat here and ask these gentlemen to come up, I'd like to at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Yeah, if the producers could come up, just a couple minutes each, just describe, your viewpoints and some of your needs. And we also then will have Representative Jason Morgan representing the family history of commercial fishing too.
Hi. I'm Dan Serafin. I own Serafin Fisheries. My grandfather fished, my father fished, I do, and my son does too, so that makes us about fourth generation. Back in the 70s, my dad was approached by the DNR to see if it was feasible to plant walleyes, to raise them, and we helped them. And boy, was that a mistake, because we created the problem. So now it's so far out of control that we've asked for help for management purposes, but the department's answer to management purposes is that's the cost of doing business, because it costs a lot of money for labor to handle millions of pounds of fish for nothing. And it's just difficult. There's not very many of us left, and if we keep going at the DNR standards, there's going to be a lot less.
How much does invasive species, we had the zebra mussel, now we got the quagga mussel, is that what it, Lake Erie's still producing large amounts of fish. I'm sure they got them on the lake bottoms too. How much does that affect the fisheries here in Lake Huron and Lake Michigan?
Well, the Lake Erie model is the only way that they have perch to coexist with walleyes is Canada harvests the walleyes.
I mean, and Lake St. Clair, although technically not a Great Lake, you know, they got a great bass fishing,
Yep.
muskie and so forth. So I'm trying to drive it. Lake trout is the big issue for the loss of whitefish because, you know, you just mentioned Fishtown, and I know people that go to restaurants there, they go there only to get whitefish, and they got to ship it in from someplace else because they can't get enough, so.
They get it from us. But the lake trout's doing a lot of predation on whitefish. They've been planting Cisco's. They got, I think it was a $15 million program from the government to plant Cisco's to feed the walleyes, because the walleyes are so bad out of control in Lake Huron. And the Cisco's don't even survive. And we've caught maybe 50 in the last 8 years out of 8 million. So that just gives you an idea how many juvenile whitefish they eat along with the Cisco's. Because they always preach to us about recruitment, but if something's eating the recruitment, because everything's zebra mussels, but I don't believe it's zebra mussels because, like I said, they plant the Cisco's, they got a jump start, they're already 3-4 inches or 5 inches long, and they don't survive.
Yeah, I know the Cisco run here, 4th of July, but Drummond Island's coming up here, so. Does anyone else make a comment on the livelihood and the effects?
I'm Dustin Van Orman with Big Stone Bay Fishery. We do put some fish into like the Leland area. We process about 1 million pounds of whitefish a year. Turns into about 500,000 pounds of whitefish fillets that pretty much stay here in northern Michigan. But our commercial guys are shrinking. We work with tribal as well. I am one of your only processors with Mr. Cross that's here that we process on average 80 to 90% of your fish that stays here in the state. We feed the public. But without the tribe, we have no walleye, we have no trout. I am about a, you know, I'm the biggest thing you have here, and I cannot compete with the Canadian businesses that put fish back here in all these restaurants. It's unbelievable to think we're the Great Lakes state and we take a back seat to putting fish on the table.
So not only can the Canada waters, they can take the fish, but then since you're limited to what species you have, just the quantity, you can't make up the difference, you know, is that why Canada's out supplying, not just because they can take the lake trout and so forth, but they can, because of that, they have just more quantity of their business?
Perch and walleye are your big ticket fish. Most, you know, perch is worth more money, so is walleye. So if you need perch and walleye, you're usually getting them from a supplier in Canada, and they're gonna make you buy your whitefish there then. And like, I can only provide the whitefish, so that puts me at a big disadvantage then, you know, to keep my accounts. The only thing that keeps me viable is the freshness and quality of my fish. We could process more, we could get more going, but that's where we need help, is we are dwindling. My biggest issue or concern as a processor is my state paperwork that came into effect about a year ago when the DNR asked us to become, I guess, up to speed with the tribes and how reporting works. And I can tell you that it started in Lake Michigan with like the Odawa tribe. They were the first ones to report twice a month, the 15th and the 1st, 5-day grace period. That's what we believed we were agreeing to. I report on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of a month with no grace period. And anybody that runs a business would know. You close your books like at the end of the month. 2nd and 4th Tuesdays mean nothing to me. I miss reporting, I get no grace period. I process about 80 transactions every 2 weeks, and it is not helping me. So I don't understand where we're gonna agree to work on things that work for us and that do not, and this is why we are a shrinking industry here.
And I will attest to the quality of your smoked whitefish.
Thank you.
Do you have somebody add anything to that, similar experiences or something to add?
Jack Cross. Similar to Dustin, what we get buried in paperwork from the DNR that's absolutely redundant. The 2nd and the 4th week, Dana Surf and Zura reported it. And then we've got to report. And then if you don't, they threaten you with a fine. Not having a grace period, what happens, falls on the weekend or on a holiday, or, you catch fish on Tuesday and you got to report on Wednesday. You don't even have time to even weigh them. And we run into a lot of issues with that. And there's really no need for it. They've already been reported. They want to know from Dana to us, to the consumer, they even want us, at some point, to have lot numbers. So you're going to get 20,000 pounds of fish, and you're going to lot number each fillet. It just doesn't work.
It sounds like earlier testimony we had on deer pelts and reporting with the processors and the hunters and everybody duplicating everything. I do want to move on. Is there another comment that might be made? I could go to Representative Morgan and have him talk about family history, and do you have something else you want to comment on?
I'd like to add a little.
Sure. I want to make sure you get a chance.
Sure. Mike Berta from Carlson's Fishery. My name's Mike Berta from Carlson's Fishery. Just to add to something Scott said, it's also half owned by my business partner, who's a fifth generation Carlson, Nels Carlson. And I kind of heard people sigh a little bit when Scott pointed out that our fish, is not coming right off the dock as much as it should be. And Fishtown, for people who haven't been there, is near Traverse City in Leland, Michigan, and it's a big tourist draw. It's the definition of pure Michigan. It's people come there and they want to come back and they want to be there. And we have a huge. We smoke tons of fish, 600 or 800 pounds of fish a day for retail purposes, but for wholesale purposes, I have to drive 3 to 5 hours every day to go get, not every day, but the days we get fish, we drive 3 to 5 hours each way and process into the night for those nights. And so, there's 350,000 people that come through Fishtown every summer, and I'd say almost all of them think that all of these fish are coming off that dock. And so it's not exactly what it seems. And there's, the lake trout topic, some of this is kind of redundant, but we're all experiencing the same thing. There's so many lake trout out there. The charter boats that line our docks, we clean their fish as well. They go out 1 mile and they drop their lines and they have a cooler full of fish. And there's one commercial fishing boat that's still leaving our port, the Joy, which is captained by Joel Peterson currently, who's from Muskegon. And he'll spend all day just dipping trout out of his nets to try to search through there and get a box of whitefish. And there's just no room for whitefish anymore with all the lake trout. And as we're all saying, if we could manage the populations of these fish so that they can coexist and have room for each other, that's kind of what we're looking for here.
Yeah, I mentioned this to Scott the other day. I don't know what TV show it was. It was public broadcast of some sort, and they were talking about the quagga mussel, and it was filtering the water so clear there was no nutrients for the whitefish. But you're saying it's the lake trout, because they didn't mention the lake trout once. I remember watching this episode.
So, obviously the whitefish are up against a multivariable problem here. They have things coming at them from all directions. The food chain, predators. It's not like just one thing is causing this, but we have control over some of those things. And we need to manage what we can with what we can control. And, we're running out of time here, and our businesses are running out of time, and this is Michigan's history, and it's going to be gone. So, less plankton, that's a problem. Sunlight going further into water, that's a problem. Infertility from old age, that's a problem. But lake trout, even if the whitefish have successful spawning, there's something waiting to eat them.
Feel free to add to this.
I'd like to add a couple things. I'm not a great public speaker. My name is Skylar Rulo. I'm the CEO, manager, and maybe, if you all cooperate with me and us, the owner of Rulo Brothers Incorporated. I'm going to try to read through this pretty quick here. I'm not a very good public speaker, so I have to read this, otherwise it would get
There will be no graded exam afterwards. You're good to
excellent,
go.
because I would fail. I just want to take you back a little bit here. As Scott said, 1830s America. And I say America because Michigan was not a state yet. My family was fishing up in Mackinac Island, and we eventually moved down to Chambers Island and then across the bay to Menominee County. From the 1830s to current, my family has fished the waters of Michigan. We have seen great times and the Great Depression. But if I have to be honest, what our family never saw coming was a suffocating overreach and blatant misuse of power by the Michigan DNR. In the 1960s, my grandfather and his brother started Rulo Brothers Incorporated. During the beginning years of our corporation, we had zero quota in place for the amount of fish that we could catch. We began buying several commercial fishing licenses in our area to help grow our business and to mainly prevent any conflicts. Around 1980, the DNR established a performance-based quota, meaning licenses that didn't catch fish would not get any increase in quota, but in fact would go down to zero if not fished. This was a blow to the small commercial fishermen who ultimately would go on to not be renewed by them due to not being able to harvest said quota. Rulo Brothers owned many licenses and actively fished them to keep the quota numbers up. As years went on, family conflicts resulted in us purchasing all but one licenses in Whitefish Management Zone 00. That's where we fish. This resulted in us owning 99% of the licenses in said zone. License 207 was the only license that did not be owned by us. 207 will remain inactive for 15 plus years. Now, I just said that the performance-based quota means if you fish it, your quota stays the same or it goes up. If you don't fish it, it goes down to zero. I'd like you to try to just keep that little tidbit of information in mind. Just prior to the new consent decree, my father traded a large amount of gear to turn our trawling into a legalized way of fishing. This was done by the approval of the Michigan DNR. In 2023, the DNR placed license 201, which I hope everyone's ears are perked right now. Rulo Brothers had purchased out of Zone 00, which we had fished. We bought my uncle, my dad's brother, out of this water. They then placed him, who had been bought out, back into 00. At the same time, the DNR moved some of our quota and distributed it to said license, which we had already owned and bought out, and license 207, which I just mentioned a few seconds ago, which had not fished in 15 plus years. These subtle moves took our company from 99% of the quota to 68% in a matter of seconds. To put this all into very simple terms, an individual who was bought out in our quota, an individual who was bought out of our zone by our own company with the approval of the DNR was then placed back into our zone. Quota we worked hard to maintain and increase over the years under performance-based quota the DNR set in place was just handed to this individual. All while this happened, the DNR also took more of our quota and gave it to a fisherman who hasn't fished, like I said, in 15 plus years. And I would just like to throw out there that the DNR had the brass balls to tell us, don't we think it's fair? So I'd like to ask you all if you think so far that our history is fair, because I'm far from over. I don't think so, but that's up to you to decide. In 2025, after close to $160,000 in lawsuits, the DNR buys out license 201, removes its quota and distributes to the remaining licenses in 00, zone 00, meaning the quota that was taken from us was then given to one individual who hasn't fished in, like I said, 15 years, and another was bought out by our very own company with the approval of none other than the DNR. Do we love government handouts around here? I'm almost done, I promise. Now, I'd like to ask, where did the funding come from this purchase, License 201, which is, quote, a research permit? Who voted on this rather large $2.9 million purchase? Would the state like to buy us all out for millions, since we're working so hard, and you want to take everything away, the DNR does? It was stated by the chief of the DNR, Mr. Claremont, in January at the Michigan Fish Producers meeting that the initial buyout did not pass due to lack of funding, but then shortly thereafter it had magically passed, and said person, my uncle, was then paid $2.9 million for not only fish that the DNR tells us we don't own, but for our own quota that we had purchased him out of. In closing, my family has spent the past 200 years providing a living by fishing. We had fed millions of people across the world, but as the years go on, it has become more and more difficult to operate with the DNR's overreach of power. I fear that my future son will never enjoy the fruits of our labor, nor the generations after him. Commercial fishing industry isn't dying because there are no fish. It's being killed off by the all-supreme government agency that is the DNR. I ask myself daily when someone will wake up and open their eyes, because it's impossible to grow a business in this environment when you have had a forced hand controlling every move. It's time to wake up and understand that an industry that is feeding you is an industry that is worth fighting for. So I hope you still ask yourself at the end of this what you consider is fair.
Certainly is impactful, so I appreciate it. We have a question from Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here today. Just a quick question. Who are the natural predators for walleye and lake trout?
They're top of the food chain with lake trout.
It's just
Lake
us.
trout would be the walleye's predator, but lake trout eat everything.
Thank you.
The only difference in Saginaw Bay, it's a shallow bay, and lake trout don't stay in there after it starts to warm up. They move into the lake.
Representative Preston.
Thank you, Chair. So I reside in Cedar River. The Rulos are close friends, and what that family has been through over the generations is ridiculous. Skylar, to a large extent, I think, suffers from a significant amount of PTSD due to what the family has been through. He just lost his father. The family's been torn apart. The DNR was part of that negotiation when the brothers separated. Greg got put up into the northern zone that was then taken over by the consent decree. The DNR could have carved out those fishing waters to keep Greg up there, but instead purposely put him right back in direct conflict with Rulo Brothers in 0-0, gave away his quota to Greg and put them in direct conflict with each other. So they literally re-facilitated a feud. And this is the type of activity that I'm talking about. That's why we went from, I don't know how many full-time fishermen that we had on the Great Lakes to 3. We have 3 left. And then we have agencies that continue to try to foment that there's this huge rift between the commercial fishermen and the charter fishermen. There isn't enough commercial fishermen left for there to be a feud. Instead, we've got walleye floating upside down on Saginaw Bay. This has to come to an end, and the legislature needs to come to a solution for commercial fishing and reassert its powers and put these guys in a position where they can succeed. Because right now, we've got Canada catching all of Michigan fish and then selling it back to us. Because they don't have the population density up there. That's how Michigan says, well, it's all right for Canada to catch those fish, even though they're our fish. Let our people catch these fish. Enough's enough. These guys, everybody at this table has been traumatized, and commercial fishing deserves a break. Sorry for the lack of a question.
Representative Wards.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. I know nothing about fishing, but it was interesting. I stumbled upon it, and I was trying to find the title of it. I can't remember, but it's a documentary on Prime Video on Amazon that I would encourage all of you on the committee to watch to understand. It really surmised a lot of what you all are saying today, and it helped me understand what the issue is and a snippet of what you're facing. I just want to echo sentiments of, I'm sorry, while I can't relate to fishing, I can relate to agriculture, and I feel the same thing. I drive around and I see that our way of life, the way of life that for hundreds of years that I came from, I have descendants that came over on the Mayflower, and that it's been slowly taken away from us, and the generations of farm ground that are being taken and covered in solar panels in my community is devastating. And so my question for you is, because I don't know your trade, and I think maybe you mentioned it, what would be the number one thing we could do right now to help you? Is it to change those reporting requirements? Is it to defund the department? Because maybe we just need to do that for a while. I mean, what would be the number one thing to help you?
I think the number one thing is just the overreach in general. Like I said, it's suffocating. It could be so many aspects. Like Dustin said, it could be the reporting. It could be, like Mr. Preston said, causing conflicts. What good is this doing for anybody? You're killing us. You know, we go to work and for all intents and purposes, bust our balls. We don't need people to hold the puppet over you and try to guide what you're going to do. If anyone knows what's best for the waters, it's probably us. We're there every single day. We see it 100%.
Can I ask one follow-up question? Thanks. So I know on in ag, for a while, there was an oversight committee that brought stakeholders in. Do you guys have anything like that for commercial fishing? Do they do where the department brings stakeholders in and you guys set the guidance and the rules?
We're allowed an opinion, but they never listen to what we suggest.
Representative Vanderwall. Then we got to move on. What? Oh, go ahead if you got an answer for it.
Like Wisconsin wholesale fisheries report once a year. Once a year. We just need more common sense and logic applied to the DNR back to us. It starts with the paperwork. It starts with MDARD in our DNR, HACCP. We're little tiny businesses that do more paperwork. I have folks that come in and always ask safety procedures. They don't have a clue. None of them know what a fishery is. There's not very many of us. You don't see us anywhere. We're not on TV. We're just these limited businesses. They come in, then they ask about training and safety and when did you train them? And it's like we throw them to the fire. If they last a week, they're getting training. Why don't you train them first? 7 out of 10 at least don't make it a day. It's not an easy industry. Like he says, we work very hard. We're there early. We stay late. We need help with those basic things to actually then prosper. Like we are over-reported. You know, we're tracking fish that are already eaten. When they want to know in 5 days where the fish is, it's in their septic tank. And why are we worrying about that for you? More than once I've sat in front of the DNR that always says we need to track these fish better. And I say, why don't you put a guy at Big Stone Bay? Because that'll save us all a lot of money. I got a picnic table, bring your clipboard, you write it down. You report to your boss at the end of the day. That'll save me time. And that's one DNR person then. Because I cannot justify or understand all the money they need to police what's left.
Yeah, that's a purpose of thing that we've been hearing and covering is the onerous overreach of just bureaucrat decisions. So.
And I've grown up in this industry. I might only be second generation, but I have always heard the rhetoric. It's like I'm a criminal to feed people. And I don't understand that. Because our state is the one going around taking little things like a paperwork error and making that a ticket. I don't understand that. I've made an error. Well, my DNR came this spring and gave me my fishing license for my brother. They gave me the wrong one. I called them in the truck on the way to the next fisherman who was given my license number and tags. You know what they asked me to do? Just cross that out, put your number down and initial it. And I said, well, you remember that when I make a mistake, because we're all human here. Why am I held to a standard of ticketing for a paperwork error when I'm overly taxed on paperwork that to me is unjustifiable to the industry?
You're preaching to the choir, or to me anyway, on that one. Representative Vanderwall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for, and your spouses for taking the time to come down and really inform us on the travesty that continues to happen. There's a couple things. One, I'm going to start out with a statement, then it's just a question. And I have a lot of friends that are in the farming business. You guys are in the natural resource business. Your number one goal is to never outfish your resource, because of you, you're gone, correct? The reporting regiment that you go through in regulations in reporting when you're coming back into the dock, what happens now inadvertently when you catch some bycatch inside your net? What happens to that bycatch now?
It goes back in the lake.
How much of that bycatch lives? Depends on the time of the year. Like right now, not very much. Correct.
Spring,
And-
fall, the majority.
And again, it comes down to the point of, here we are with a resource. Accident, it's not your intent to ever catch. There's always going to be some inadvertent fish that are caught. If we report the inadvertent fish that are caught and you're within a certain you're not doing it on purpose, but we're wasting a natural resource that we're just throwing back into the lake to become chum for other fish.
Well, the seagulls love us.
Well, that's probably the biggest problem, right?
Right.
Is what we call the dump chicken. I just really want to say to you guys, we'll work hard for you. Continue to work hard for us and help us help you. But thank you for what you do. I appreciate it. We're going to move forward and do whatever we can to make sure that we secure your future for your family and especially the next generation. That's the most important tradition that we're about to lose here in the state of Michigan, and it's heartbreaking. So thank you for being here.
And it's a great segue to bring Representative Morgan up. He wanted to speak about his family history in commercial fishing. Thanks for coming. I expected to move along a little quicker, and thanks for coming over a little quicker, but.
Thank you, Chair Martin, Vice Chairs St. Germain, McFall, members of the committee. I'll be brief. I know you've been here for a long day, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share my family's story and to speak in support of the commercial fishers along with the communities that rely on them. Like so many of the folks you've heard from today, this issue is deeply personal for me. I grew up on a commercial fishery in Pinconning, Michigan. I'm the proud son of a commercial fisherman, and it was a family business. My father, my grandfather, and my uncle, they all fished the Saginaw Bay. Generations of my family worked those waters. Early mornings, long nights, often in dangerous conditions. It pulled in the entire family. Cleaning fish, helping fix nets, or my personal favorite, sitting on the dock with a fishing pole, catching catfish that escaped the net. Everybody felt like they were doing their part in the family. My dad was the last fisherman in our family. He loved being a fisherman, and it wasn't just his job or even a career. It was a way of life, not just for him, but for all of us. It was pride in a hard day's work, and ultimately something that ended with him. The growing pressure from invasive species, the state efforts, particularly planting game fish, that commercial fish aren't allowed to catch, which you've heard some of today, the tightening regulations from the Michigan DNR. My dad and my family just struggled to make ends meet. He tried everything he could, even taking a second job as a union laborer during winter months
to make enough money just to lose money again fishing during the warmer seasons. Even with his tireless efforts, even with the years of hard labor on his body, he just couldn't make it work. So he did what many family-owned small businesses are forced to do during hard times, and he sold the family business. He really sold a piece of our family history and a piece of his heart, quite honestly. Most of my colleagues were unaware or may be unaware, but my dad passed away two summers ago, just 7 months into my first term as a legislator. He went into hospice as I was sworn into office, and I would leave Lansing after votes to care for him for months, as I was learning how this place works up here. As I sat with my dad for hours at a time, he enjoyed more than anything just sharing stories my family had about the fishery and the life he poured into it, the pride that it was, and about the work of generations of Morgans who were part of a piece of Michigan's history. I loved my dad and committed to doing everything I possibly could to help other families to keep this heritage alive in our state, many of which you see sitting before you today. Sorry, I didn't mean to get sort of emotional in this, but this is just my story. The more you listen, the more you pay attention to this issue, you'll hear similar ones across the state, working families struggling to survive. Now, I want to note that we don't make public policy or laws based on emotion. It should be based in good policy, and so let me give you a little bit more info on that. As you've heard, there are just 13 state-licensed commercial fishers in Michigan, with only 3 of them being full-time today. In 1966, there were 750. We've gone from an industry that once supported actually tens of thousands of jobs to one that's on the brink of collapse. Commercial fishing isn't just a relic or a footnote in a textbook. It's part of our story as Michigan and part of our economy. These are small business owners, working people. These are families who want to make a living, feed their neighbors, and build success and opportunity for future generations to come. Commercial fishers aren't asking for special treatment, a bailout, or an expansion to what it was decades ago. They're just asking for fairness, for a system that reflects reality. As you heard earlier from Scott Everett, Michigan has a long and rich fishing history. But history alone doesn't protect jobs. History doesn't change laws. That's on us. That's on us as legislators. It's too late for my family fishery, but it isn't too late for us to help others. So last term, I introduced bipartisan legislation to help bring balance back to the way we regulate commercial fishing in this state. Thank you to many of you who co-sponsored, and particularly Rep. Preston, who's continued to work on that issue with me. When regulations aren't working, it should be bipartisan to go back and fix them. Challenge have existed under Democrats and Republican administrations over the years, and fundamentally, this is about supporting our small businesses and making sure Michigan's natural resources are managed with care. Charter fishing is certainly a priority in our state, and for good reason. Brings tourism, supports local businesses, and is a proud tradition for thousands of families. But commercial and charter fishing have value, and both deserve a voice. And most importantly, both can coexist in partnership with love for the lakes. So to my colleagues, we're at a pivotal moment. Are we going to work together to save Michigan's fishing heritage, or are we going to stand by and watch it fade away? I hope that we will come together in finding solutions to support these small businesses, to support these families, to support these hardworking Michiganders. Thank you for the chance to share my family's story. This is the first time I've ever done so publicly. And I hope this is the start of a healthy conversation about how we can make things right. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for the wrap-up. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming down, taking your time. Obviously, you work hard, and this is a lot of time away from your business. We appreciate your efforts, and we'll consider that for sure. Let's see, Representative Wirtz moves to excuse absent members. Being no objection, available by unanimous consent. There being no further business coming before the committee will stand adjourned.